Boston in the 1700s was a tinderbox wrapped in colonial charm, a bustling port of 15,000 souls perched on a near island where Puritan certainty was colliding with Enlightenment ideals, where British merchants grew rich on rum and molasses, while radical thinkers plotted revolution in taverns and meeting houses. This cramped peninsula, connected to the mainland by a narrow neck of land, was becoming the intellectual and commercial heart of British North America, yet it chafed under imperial control with growing intensity. The harbor bristled with ships carrying goods from across the Atlantic world, manufactured goods from England, sugar from the Caribbean, slaves from Africa, all flowing through wharves that stretched into the cold waters of Massachusetts Bay. Today, advanced AI technology allows us to transform period engravings, maps, and paintings into photorealistic recreations, bringing this revolutionary city back to life. Join me as we step into the Boston our ancestors once knew, a city that would spark a revolution and birth a nation. The waterfront, Boston's lifeline. Stand on Long Wharf in 1760, and you're standing on one of colonial America's greatest commercial achievements. This massive pier stretches nearly half a mile into Boston Harbor, long enough that ocean-going ships can dock directly alongside warehouses without needing smaller boats to transfer cargo. The scale of activity is staggering for what's essentially a frontier town. Look at the ships crowding the harbor. Those tall-masted vessels flying British colors are merchants carrying manufactured goods from London. Cloth, tools, tea, books, furniture, everything the colonies can't yet produce themselves. That cluster of smaller sloops, they're coastal traders moving between Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and Charleston, creating an intercolonial commerce that's slowly forging American identity. But watch those ships with particular attention, the ones low in the water, moving with suspicious speed. Those are likely smugglers, and they're absolutely essential to Boston's economy. The British Navigation Acts require colonists to trade only with Britain and pay heavy duties on imported goods, especially molasses from French and Spanish Caribbean islands. Boston merchants systematically ignore these laws, bribing customs officials, using false manifests, and moving goods through unofficial channels. The infamous triangle trade flows through here. Ships leave Boston loaded with rum distilled in local distilleries. They sail to West Africa, trading rum for enslaved humans. Those enslaved people are transported in horrific conditions to Caribbean sugar plantations. The ships return to Boston with molasses, which is distilled into more rum, completing the cycle. It's enormously profitable and morally monstrous, and Boston's prosperity is built on it. The waterfront smells of salt water, tar, hemp rope, fish, and the sweet sour stench of molasses. Barrels are everywhere, being rolled, loaded, unloaded, stacked 10 high in warehouses. Sailors from a dozen nations work the docks: English, Irish, Scottish, African, Portuguese, speaking a babel of languages and accents. Taverns line the waterfront, rough establishments where deals are made, crews are recruited, and fights break out nightly. Watch the longshoremen loading cargo. These are free laborers, mostly white, working brutal hours for decent wages by colonial standards. Slavery exists in Boston, but it's less economically dominant than in southern colonies. Most enslaved people here work as domestic servants, skilled craftsmen, or dock workers, living in closer proximity to their enslavers than plantation slaves, creating a different but still oppressive dynamic. The harbor itself is Boston's protection and prison. The islands dotting the bay, Castle Island with its fort, the channels between them, all make naval approach difficult. But the same geography makes expansion nearly impossible. Boston is running out of land, forcing development to push north and south along the peninsula's edges, filling in tidal marshes and building wharves into the harbor. Faneuil Hall, the cradle of liberty. Walk up from the waterfront to Faneuil Hall, opened in 1743 as a combined market and meeting house, and you're entering the space that will earn the name Cradle of Liberty. The ground floor is a bustling market where vendors sell meat, produce, and goods of all kinds. The air is thick with the smell of fresh fish, butchered meat, vegetables, and the press of human bodies. But climb the stairs to the second floor, to the Great Hall, and you're in the space where Boston's political consciousness takes shape. Town meetings happen here, gatherings where propertied men debate local issues, pass ordinances, and elect officials. This is direct democracy in action, rowdy and participatory, very different from the hierarchical British system. By the 1760s, these meetings are becoming increasingly radical. British attempts to tax the colonies, first the Sugar Act, then the Stamp Act, then the Townshend Acts, are debated here with growing fury. Speakers like James Otis and Samuel Adams turn these gatherings into protests against imperial overreach. The phrase, "no taxation without representation," echoes from these walls before it becomes a revolutionary slogan. Look around the hall. The men gathered here are mostly middle class, merchants, shopkeepers, artisans, some wealthy, most comfortable, but not rich. They're literate, politically engaged, and increasingly convinced that Britain is treating the colonies as exploitable resources rather than equal partners in empire. The Puritan tradition of covenant theology, the idea that government derives from consent of the governed, is merging with Enlightenment political philosophy to create something revolutionary. But notice who's absent: women, enslaved people, the poor, indigenous peoples. This emerging democracy is limited, exclusive, protecting the interests of propertied white men. The revolution being debated here will expand liberty for some while maintaining oppression for others. The Common, Boston's shared space. Boston Common, established in 1634, is America's oldest public park, though calling it a park is generous. It's more accurately a cow pasture where citizens can graze their animals, a military training ground, and public execution site, all wrapped into one 50-acre space at the peninsula's narrowest point. On any given day, you might see militia companies drilling, learning the manual of arms that will prove essential when war comes. These aren't professional soldiers. They're shopkeepers, farmers, artisans, required by law to own weapons and train regularly. The training is often casual, sometimes drunken, but it creates a population familiar with firearms and basic military tactics. The Common is also where public punishments happen. The stocks and pillory stand near Park Street, where petty criminals sit locked in wooden restraints while passers-by mock them, throw rotten vegetables, or worse. Whipping posts see regular use, stripping criminals to the waist and lashing them before crowds. Enslaved people who commit offenses often receive harsher punishments than free whites for identical crimes. For more serious offenses, the gallows stand ready. Public hangings draw enormous crowds, sometimes thousands, treating execution as spectacle and moral lesson combined. Condemned prisoners give speeches, often confessing their sins and warning the crowd away from criminal paths. Ministers preach about sin and salvation. Vendors sell food and drink. It's horrifying and normalized, part of the social order that few question, but the Common is also where ordinary life happens. Families picnic on warm days, children play games, couples court under careful supervision. The British Army will camp here when they occupy Boston in the 1770s, trampling grass and cutting trees for firewood, actions that further inflame colonial resentment. The churches. Puritan Boston's soul. Boston was founded by Puritans seeking religious freedom to practice their particular strict brand of Protestantism, and that heritage permeates everything. The Old South Meeting House, built in 1729, is more than a church. It's a gathering place where over 5,000 people can assemble, making it Boston's largest indoor space. In December 1773, This building will host the meeting that triggers the Boston Tea Party. Bostonians gather to protest the Tea Act, which grants the British East India Company a monopoly on tea sales and undercuts colonial merchants. Samuel Adams, master organizer and propagandist, helps orchestrate the protest. When negotiation fails, Adams allegedly gives a signal: this meeting can do nothing more to save the country. Within hours, men disguised as Mohawk Indians board ships in the harbor and dump 342 chests of tea worth thousands of pounds into the water. It's a carefully planned act of civil disobedience, property destruction without violence to persons, designed to make a political point. British authorities are outraged, responding with the coercive acts that Bostonians call the Intolerable Acts, closing the port, revoking Massachusetts' charter, allowing British officials accused of crimes to be tried in Britain rather than locally. These harsh responses, intended to punish Boston and warn other colonies, instead unite Americans in sympathy and resistance, pushing the colonies toward war. Boston's other churches reflect religious diversity that would have horrified the original Puritan settlers. The Anglican King's Chapel serves British officials and loyalist colonists. There's a Baptist church, despite Puritans' historical opposition to that denomination. A small but growing Catholic presence exists, though they face discrimination. Even a Jewish community worships, though without a formal synagogue yet. The religious landscape reflects broader changes. Puritan certainty is giving way to pluralism, strict doctrinal conformity to individual conscience, theocratic impulses to secular government. These shifts make revolution possible by creating space for dissent and diversity of thought. The Taverns, where revolution brews. Step into the Green Dragon Tavern on Union Street, and you're entering what Daniel Webster will later call the headquarters of the revolution. This isn't hyperbole. In these smoky rooms, over tankards of rum, cider, and beer, Boston's revolutionary leaders meet, plan, and organize. The Green Dragon hosts the Long Room Club, later called the Loyal Nine, the group that organizes resistance to the Stamp Act. They plan protests, coordinate with groups in other colonies, write inflammatory pamphlets, and orchestrate actions like hanging tax collector effigies from the Liberty Tree. Samuel Adams, Paul Revere, James Otis, John Hancock, Joseph Warren all frequent this tavern, debating philosophy and plotting revolution. Taverns in colonial Boston are more than drinking establishments. They're community centers, news exchanges, meeting halls, and proto-democratic spaces where men from different classes mingle with relative equality. A merchant and a carpenter can share a table, debate politics, and toast liberty together in ways that wouldn't happen in more formal settings. The drink flows freely. Rum is the colonists' beverage of choice, cheap and plentiful thanks to the molasses trade. Beer and cider are common. Wine is for the wealthy. Tea, ironically, is popular until it becomes a political symbol of British oppression, after which patriots ostentatiously switch to coffee as a show of resistance. These taverns are where news arrives first. Ships from London bring newspapers, pamphlets, and word of political developments. The information is shared, debated, interpreted, and spread through the city within hours. In an era before mass media, taverns serve as information hubs, forming public opinion and mobilizing political action. But they're also surveillance targets. British authorities know revolutionaries meet here. Spies and informers infiltrate meetings. Tavern keepers must balance supporting the patriot cause with avoiding British crackdown. It's a dangerous game, and not everyone survives it. The storm brewing. By 1775, Boston is a city occupied by British troops, its port closed by parliamentary decree, its charter suspended, its people seething with resentment and preparing for war. The countryside around Boston is stockpiling weapons and ammunition. Militias drill regularly. Committees of correspondence coordinate resistance across the colonies. On April 19, 1775, British troops march from Boston to seize weapons stored in Concord. Paul Revere and William Dawes ride ahead, warning the countryside. At Lexington Green, militiamen face British regulars in a confrontation that escalates into gunfire. 8 Americans die. The British push on to Concord but find most weapons already moved. On the march back to Boston, Colonial militia attack from behind walls, trees, and houses, turning the British retreat into a bloody fighting withdrawal. The Revolutionary War has begun, and Boston is at its center. The city will be besieged by colonial forces, occupied by British troops, and eventually evacuated when the British abandon it in March 1776. Many Loyalist families leave with the British Army, never to return, their property confiscated, their names erased from a city that no longer wants them. This Boston, this Puritan port town turned revolutionary hotbed, created something new. The idea that government derives its legitimacy from the consent of the governed, that liberty is worth fighting and dying for, that ordinary people have the right to challenge arbitrary power. The ideals were imperfect, the execution flawed, the benefits unequally distributed. But the seeds planted in Boston's taverns, meeting houses, and churches would grow into a nation and inspire liberation movements worldwide. Understanding this Boston, this crucible of revolution, helps us grasp both the promise and contradictions of American founding. Noble principles coexisting with slavery and dispossession, calls for liberty alongside limited democracy, universal ideals applied selectively. It's complicated, messy, and profoundly human, which is exactly what makes it worth studying. This was just a glimpse of Boston in the 1700s, a colonial port town about to spark a revolution. If you enjoyed this step back in time, please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss where we're going next. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the past.